And welcome to Conservatives Talk.
And for starters, the White House can't say the R word.
It's exactly what you think. On top of that, the Inflation Reduction Act is just a huge setup.
Probably about as big as a setup as the fact that the NATO Treaty can get us in an unconstitutional war.
And we're finding out that a drop in the bucket can overwhelm major cities like D.C.
And speaking of D.C., Buck keeps asking us about where in the world is Paul Pelosi.
This is going to be an interesting one.
I'm excited.
And welcome back to Conservatives Talk. My name's Justin.
And this is Jamie.
And our preferred pronouns are who the hell cares. And as always, trip Jamie up on that one a little bit. And as always, we like to start off each show.
I'm a man.
But who the hell cares what the pronouns are?
Dude, we're not even going to get into that in this show.
I mean, really.
There's enough garbage to unpack. As you can see, I wore this show proudly today because clearly Democrats don't know where their brain is. Sorry.
Well, you know, hey, it is what it is.
Hey, as we usually start.
Oh, well, as always, anytime you come across anything that we put out on any of our platforms, any of our productions, make sure you hit the like and the share button. By liking and sharing any of our content as you come across it, it really helps us to get higher up in the news feed and reach a broader audience than what we would generally be able to reach by just what we put out on our own. Make sure you also subscribe to any of our platforms that you see any of our productions on. That way you can stay up to date with anything that we put and produce and put out there. That way you can stay up to date with our shows. You can see special events and occurrences that are going on that we're putting forward and moving forward on, and really help to, keep you in the minds of Jamie and myself, which could be a very scary thought. Also, make sure you go to our website there on the screen, conservativestalk.org. Hit the sponsor tab in the upper right-hand corner or the lower right-hand corner and help us out with what you're able to. That all of our sponsorships go directly back into the show. It really helps us to be able to have a better production, to be able to do more and have some of these larger opportunities that we're moving forward on and putting together. And while you're there, make sure that you sign up for our email list. We are still in the process of building out our bi-weekly newsletter that we're going to be sending out. And like we mentioned the last time, we have we have something that's in the works right now that is going to be fundamentally huge on a national level. At least we think in every metric that we see that we know of is saying that it will. It will actually give a big teaser of what that's going to be and what it's going to look like. And we can't give you everything, but we'll give you a little bit of information of what's going to be coming soon. And that way you'll have more of an anticipation, just kind of a little quenching of the thirst and exactly what we're doing. So make sure that you sign up for that as well.
Yeah. Can I do my favorite part?
Let's do it.
95 days until we beat Stacey Abrams.
I am excited, as always.
We're in double digits.
We are. We've hit that mark. And it's interesting. Well, we're going to have to start preparing something to fill that time slot, like we mentioned the last time.
Yeah. We'll see.
Well, we'll have to come up with something.
Days till Trump announces, or
yeah, I'll tell you what. We could even set up a we could do like a little 50-50 cash prize type of a deal. We could have sign up for sponsors where folks essentially raffle off days that they think that the president's going to announce on, and
those cow things we used to do in high school.
Exactly. And the person that gets closest to that date gets half of the proceeds from that 50-50 raffle.
I like that.
Oh, we'll have to work on building that out. That's actually a pretty good idea.
Yeah, might have to get a permit.
Well, not too terribly bad.
No, just thinking out loud. Thinking
that's what we have the old man for.
So true.
Those retainer fees go a long way. So let's jump right into it. The White House can't say the R word.
Yeah, and by R word, we mean recession.
Jamie wanted to make that explicitly clear.
Because I almost even said it, but look.
But it's not far from the truth either way. So,
well, because that's kind of the thing, right? Whenever Republicans are in office, they always want to claim that, it's the Republicans who and our policies who help push recessions, blah, blah, blah. But you can kind of look at it because this is kind of the same thing that happened with Clinton, right? Where they just didn't want to say it, even though everyone kind of knew where it is. Now, there are telling signs inside of the GDP that trigger what we call a recession.
Yes.
And part of that is that you have a negative rate for 2 consecutive quarters.
And we're going to come back to that statement that you just made, where you used the term "is" twice.
You already throwing me off. Go ahead.
Well, no. Go ahead with what you're saying.
Here's the thing.
I'm giving a little
GDP
insight into the future.
GDP comes negative for 2 consecutive quarters. We're in a recession, right? Usually, in that time frame, you also see unemployment rate go up, right? But the jobs number is still fairly high, which is why they refuse to say that we're in a recession. So the larger factors that we say, hey, we're now showing signs of a recession, are what's really already been triggered, right? So you have inflation that's already there, you have interest rates going up, you have 2 consecutive quarters of negative outputs. Then you turn around and you're going to say that, well, unemployment's high, so that's why we're not going to call it a recession.
Well,
like that's very
low.
Unemployment's low, jobs are high, right? Because they go hand in hand. You keep trying to think of the best way to explain this as simple as possible. Think about it just the way that it is. If people are hiring, right, or people are stable within their job and their wages are good, no one's getting laid off, then you start to say, okay, well, this area is fine. We have a good market for jobs. What we haven't seen in this yet is what we haven't seen on a large scale is what we're starting to see, and that is layoffs. Even though we have high job availability, tech companies, financial companies, they're all starting to lay people off because production companies, because they're all starting to see it. And these industries are usually right in line with however the webs and flows of the economy move anyway. So tech and finance kind of go hand in hand now because they are a large portion of our economic, stability when we start looking at investment primarily. So productivity is steadily moving along, right? But this is something that I've always kind of had a conversation about. There's a certain percentage of the working population or the population as a whole that if we were to ever remove that from the calculation for whatever reason, you can still show a productive number inside of our GDP. And so that's why, when a lot of people talk about universal health care, right? 50% of the debt is medical debt that's accumulated by almost only 5% of the total population. So that's why people started, that's why in the old day, Mitt Romney and, Massachusetts Care kind of came out with its, state facilitized health care, was because they realized that, we can show that we're a stronger state economically if we just pay for 5% of our population who's making up a good bit of our medical debt. Where the left and Obamacare took that wrong is that they essentially took that idea and tried to nationalize it when healthcare issues are really like almost everything else, a state-based situation, to where if a state ever looked at its own population, for example, right, in the South, we have a larger obesity rate. So there may be policies that could be tailored to that could be going towards, some kind of program, right? That could in itself help a little bit more. But that is the premise around what a better state ran facility could have done versus trying to have one size fit all that's going to change every 6 months. Because, part of the problem that we're having now is you get those people who go in the marketplace, they'll get it for only so long, and then their rates increase and they're back in the marketplace. It's the continuum cycling throughout it, because insurance has no real basis of boundary. It still has to make its premium. It's a private business. It's not going to change. So anyway, I said all that to say
it's almost like you've gone over that 1 month introductory that introductory cost for a streaming service, and now you're having to pay a higher price.
Correct. It's like what everybody did with Disney Plus. Everybody went in there and binge watched Disney Plus for that first 30 days, and they were like, we pay enough for this, we're going to cancel our this extra $8, and then those people who didn't cancel got immediately hit with the rate increase when they went up to like $12, $13. Same thing with everything else. That's exactly how you're starting to see the market take care of itself, even though they, that's what the left said it wouldn't do, even though all of us knew that that's what was going to happen.
Well, it's so they say that, it's been a great job market, or the job market's been great. Really, more jobs are being produced, and the job market in itself is growing, as well as the unemployment rate is falling. But the thing about that is you're coming off the tail end of an era where the federal government and the states governments had literally shut down the industry sector, every industry sector outside
retail,
of healthcare across the board.
Yep.
So of course all those jobs went away. So now they're starting to come back and grow back up after the government has already authorized all of these incentive payments to be paid out through a lot of these grants and these loans. Now we're starting to see that all of these funds that at the federal level have been drying up. So they're starting to roll back these jobs now.
Which is why I led with this whole idea and used universal healthcare as an example, right? Because they essentially have already taken a certain section of the population out. Those who are in the restaurant or the retail industry, there's a portion of them, 1% to 2%, that they have already basically excluded from it unintentionally.
Well, they also did that with the unemployment rate. Folks that have been unemployed, that stopped, or who have been looking for employment past a certain period of time, or who have stopped looking for employment, then they just don't associate them with that rate at all.
Correct. Which is once you pull someone out of there, right, you immediately exponentially jump the number in GDP once you start adding them in there. So it's almost like when you start operating at a loss, you almost got to you have to double plus whatever your next gain is in order to actually be profitable again. So take that from a qualitative and put it in a quantitative context. When we start talking about, instead of like money and numbers, we're talking about people and numbers. So what they're doing is they're saying, okay, well, jobs rates are good. Okay, well, you already had people shut down where they had to lose these jobs for a while. You supported them, so now you have to bring them back into the economy. So once all of that federal aid drives up and all states stop using different grant programs to fund people who have been out of work or have had loss or anything else like that, once they get back into the workplace, what is the real net job gain? That's the real question.
That's a very good question. One of the things that you just said there that really jumped to mind was the whole grant and stimulus proponent of that there. Every time that I open up my news feed on my iPad, my iPhone, my laptop, whatever, I, without fail, always see an article that says this state has a $1,500 stimulus package coming its way. How are we still giving out stimulus packages now, when are supposedly giving out stimulus packages now, when we're supposed to be seeing all of this massive job growth and this record unemployment rate, or this record low unemployment rate? Why are we still handing out these stimulus packages?
So here's how it went. All right. The federal government's funny, right? Because one thing that is very interesting is when the federal government hands out money, right? Whoever hands out the money makes the rules.
Of course.
It's not
like
like
history. Whoever
well,
wins writes the
correct,
history.
but it's not like state funds, right? Like in the state of Georgia, it don't matter if it's federal, state, whoever. If it's got anything to do with a road, it comes through the Department of Transportation first. Period. In a discussion, it don't matter like what it is, anything like that. There are very few limited sources that you can go to that will give you money for roads that do not include the Georgia Department of Transportation. All right. It's different with federal money because if it comes from federal highway, there's one set of rules. If it comes directly from Treasury, there's another set of rules. If it comes, from a committee or Congress does not designate anything outside of the funds coming from Treasury, well, as far as like the regulations for it, then it all just goes into, the federal code of how you actually are supposed to spend it and use it. It's like, contractors and anybody else knows.
Yeah.
Okay. The way that they set up the American Recovery Act prolongs how long it actually takes to recover. So in the American Recovery Act, they were given in multiple tranches. So it's not like other rewards where they say, okay, we give you, here's where your account is. You know what I mean? We regulate how you draw down on it. Here is half your money. In 366, 67 days, you can go and apply to get your second tranche of money, and then we'll give it to you after that. So really what happened was you prolonged it. Now, here's my biggest problem with that is depending on how it was given out, because some states allow it to go directly to a municipality. Some of it will have to go through the state, then to a municipality. And then depending on how that county or city or province divvied it out, then it's like, okay, some of them chose to hire people, which is a major problem. Some of them chose to give it away because it included in that, we could give this to businesses to help support their business however they see fit, as long as they fit these criteria.
Or bonuses for certain occupations.
So, well, that's PPP. That's a little different. Right. Yeah. So, and here's what I'm separating the two. Okay. Because to make this relevant, those who gave it to businesses, those businesses chose to, instead of, they used it for their business, right? But they used they used another pot for what they said they were going to do and use that to fund an employee. How are you going to sustain that job? Because that money's not coming back. Because, anyone who works with government or worked as a contractor for government knows that the one thing you don't do is take a grant to fund a position. Because then when that money runs out, you still have to make sure that your revenues support paying for that person. So businesses aren't usually operated like that. Businesses will take the money and then a couple years later, they'll be like, I have a gap in my budget. Why do I have this gap? Well, because your revenues never supported it. You never were making enough money to begin with to support it. You took out a loan or you got some funding that helped you get to this far. And now that you don't have that extra flux of cash, you either got to go get it again from somewhere else, or you have to make sure that your margins match, which is where a lot of people fail.
I mean, it definitely does. The numbers definitely do add up on that. So the reason why we bring any of this up and the reason why we talk about this whole topic is simply because, quite frankly, Joe Biden and the White House have refused to acknowledge that we have officially entered into a recession.
We're in a recession.
We are, by the very definition, entered into a recession. And the reason why I brought up the whole using the double is word is because this takes my mindset back to what Clinton said back during his impeachment. It all depends on what your definition of is, simply because they have taken what a recession is and tried to redefine it and spin it
like they've done everything else.
Exactly. I mean, it's gotten so bad, and it's to the point to where Wikipedia has actually gone in and made their page for the definition of recession semi-protected, to where it actually has to be verified before anything can be changed on that page.
Because they don't want anybody to go in there and change it beforehand. And then, because see, that's the big problem with majority of where people get their information from now anyway.
That's very true.
You know, because
it's easy. It's right there on top of the Google feed.
Well, not just Wikipedia, right? Like
it was worth the Google.
They come in and Google will just change it because Google's like, oh, this fits our agenda. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like before too long, the definition of woman won't be searchable inside of a Google search, and people will be like, see, I told you I Googled it and it's not here.
Well, it'll have a definition. It'll just have about 25 to 30.
I wonder if they only propagandize this in the US. Because think about it, like they operate in all countries, and they tailor themselves to every country that they're in. Well, we know that they do this with China.
I mean, look at what Twitter does. If you want to take that example, look at what Twitter does. I mean, they have a certain algorithm for the United States, but if you go to other countries such as Iran, where the Ayatollah goes on and tweets "death to America" multiple times a day,
you can't find it.
Still doesn't, and he's still one of the highest followed religious leaders in the country. Yet they won't ban him from that. But if you try and do something like that here in the United States, you're getting banned.
Yep.
It's like you can't use another word that we can't use anymore is, the G word. We can't say it. It's if we say it, it'll get us banned.
Yep.
We're not quite ready to go to that place just yet because we've still got a lot more that you need to hear from us, or at least what we think you might want to hear from. So we're gonna play their game.
Yeah, and speaking of
to a limit.
Speaking of the refusing to say a recession, right? That still goes back to them still refusing. You know what I mean? Let's lead into the next subject, right? Where we're talking about the new bill that they just passed.
Yes. So the whole idea behind that is the Inflation Reduction Act. It's by and far a huge setup. It honestly is. It was a huge setup. A lot of the piece, or a lot of the provisions within that bill, and I'm going to throw some numbers at you on this right here. So the claim is that this bill is going to bring $739 billion in taxable revenue, or it's going to bring in this revenue into the United States, or to the state, or the federal government through taxing. It is going to spend $369 on Green New Deal initiatives. They claim it's the energy incentives and kind of the clean or the climate initiatives and things along that nature. And it says that it is going to pay off upwards of $300 billion in debt. That's what or at least that's what is coming out of the OEME, the executive office.
I wish I had done the math beforehand, because when you're basically going in debt up to $500 billion every quarter, you're moving up on average $500 billion every quarter to where we are now roughly, or I forgot since I got off Twitter, I used to get a notification every day, but we're roughly around $33 trillion in debt. What is 300 billion? I'm just saying, well,
I mean, they claim that it's going to be 300 billion,
which is all that is extra taxes, right? They're going to double down on municipal bonds and corporate bonds, and you're going to increase
corporate tax rate. It's going to be up to 15%. It is on the individual level. You are going to see a tax rate increase if you are making less or $10,000 or less. I think it's 3.1%. If you're making less than 150,000, it's 5.1%, and anything over 150,000, I think it's 9-point-something% tax increase. And that doesn't sound, that sounds relatively small, but when you're thinking about it, you're already taxed at almost 24% already. You're giving the federal government over a quarter of your entire paycheck,
I don't know
just in taxes, without going into Medicare, without going into Social Security and everything else along that nature. These are added percentages on top of everything else you're going to have to pay.
Now I'm like, do I go get remarried, or do I like stay single, or I don't know how to
Remarried. Remarried. Well, okay then. So the reason why I bring up this is very speculative in nature of how much they're going to reduce the national debt is, and I like to reference this. Let's talk about let's talk a moment about the federal student loan or the federal student loan program. It started in '97 under Clinton. When it first started, it was going to, what was it? It was supposed to raise $200 billion in revenue just from investments alone, or interest payments, essentially, between the years of '97 and 2001. However, we find out that the Office of Higher Education actually vastly overcalculated what this could be, to the tune of we are actually losing $120 billion in revenue.
It is honestly cheaper. Like, people hate this, right? Because no one wants to think about it in the sense of everybody, I'll put it this way. Everybody thinks about it in the sense of, I'm not paying for someone else's mistake.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, before we go there, the reason why I mentioned this is because this program or these people are the same ones that are telling us that we're paying off $300 billion, that we're going to be raising our the federal income by $700 billion, but yet there was a deficit of over $320 billion that they miscalculated on. But yet we're supposed to trust them to be able to tell us that, oh, we're going to be bringing in 700,000. This was done in '97. These numbers were. So the discrepancy between what was done then and just how corrupt and everything they are now, I can only imagine just the shortfall that we're going to see with this.
So, two things I want to say first. One is, everyone thinks about it as in the sense of, I'm not going to pay for someone else's debt.
Mm-hmm.
Those were their poor choices. Okay, mine included.
I didn't. Got the GI Bill.
The other side of this is, and a friend of mine says it the best way in a joke I've ever heard in my entire life. And he said, when he was a child, bear with me. He said, when he was a child, he let his friend borrow a video game. And a week went by. He asked him, hey, can I get that game back? He goes, yeah, just give me a minute. I'll bring it to you this weekend. Didn't happen. 2 more weeks went by. Asked for the game. Nothing happened. Month goes by. He asked him again. And his buddy looked at me and says, you asked me for that game again, you're never going to get it. And basically, because the federal government has poorly ran this program, or only truly incentivizes those who go work for the government, what has really happened is the American people have turned and said, you asked me for that money again, you're going to have to come get it. So it's become cheaper, right? Because we know that they're never going to get that money. People have learned to live without paying for their student loans, or they've gone to the public sector for a certain period of time to have the 95% of them forgiven, and then turn around and, like a good portion of this is people who are in the public sector. The way that it works in the public sector is you make a certain number of payments on time, and they suspended what you had to pay all through COVID and now. And if you hadn't set up a program yet, they will backtrack it. So those people who had to pay 120 payments on time, they'll go back to 2020 and say, for every month since 2020 until we say stop, you don't have to pay it, but we're going to count it towards you. So whenever you do come back, you may only have 10 payments left. And then the rest of your balance, which is 50% or more, is forgiven. And so then the people it only really affects are people who, on average, right, are making $74,000 a year or more. And so that's where this starts to really adjust some things, because people who are of lower income, right, or the median, right, the median in the United States is roughly, $50,000 to $63,000 a year. Those who are making that or less, right, essentially the ones who are going to be paying for the balance of those who are making 74 or more. And so then when you look at the totality of it, you're like, well, the people who went to work for the government are getting theirs forgiven because they just became part of the system. Those who are left are making an average, but they can't get them to spend more because they're paying $400 or $500 a month of their income towards student loans. So they want those people to be forgiven too, so that then you can increase GDP. Because as long as they're consuming, as long as they're buying more, and still forgetting the little guy who's making, your regular wage, they don't care.
My suggestion is that just join the military. They'll forgive it.
Same. It's the same thing because the cost is still there. You know what I mean? They're just paying it for it up front. But to bring all that back into this, right? The same thing's going to happen when we start talking about climate change.
Mm-hmm.
When we start talking about how all of this is going to be re-expensed out, right? Because just like when we were talking about earlier with the CARES money and the ARPA money and then everything else, right? These are one-time funds that they're going to either forgive, and the balance sheet doesn't change. Whether it's asset, liability, how you deduct it off, it's still on your ledger somewhere of how it's reduced. And when you're a solvent, there is no forgiving.
That's very true.
You're just transferring debt from one area to another, or you're canceling out, which is by method really nothing when you're a solvent.
Yes. So another part of this bill is that it says that its main purpose and its main goal is to reduce inflation. Now, there was there's, in all honesty, of all places, The Hill. They put out an article by a gentleman who went through all of it and broke it all down and said, okay, yeah, you're right. It will reduce inflation. However, it will only reduce inflation by 0.33% over 10 years. So it's going to take it 10 years to go less than a third of 1%. That's how much it's going to actually affect inflation.
The only way to reduce inflation is to cause a recession. It's the only way. Like every time
Jamie's going to start a riot.
Look, you can go back and you can track it, right? Because truthfully, the 2010s are the only time frame, one of the only time frames that we can track over the last 100, 200 years to where we haven't had some form of a recession consistently every 10 years on average. All right. And some people attribute that to how deep the recession, how deep the Great Recession was. And then it took just that long to rebound to where we could say, okay, we're actually fully up and operational. We need a market correction to see where we truly are, which is what some people feel that this is. Some people also feel that era was just really fluffed by tech. And, once the tech bubble bursts, then we'll kind of see where we are. But all of that to say this, the only way to decrease inflation is to cause a recession. And you do that by increasing interest rates, right? When you keep interest rates low, it gives me no reason to save my money. None. Because why would I put it in a savings account? Because I'm going to earn what, 0.1 basis point, 0.25% on my money when I can go get 10% from putting in an investment over here. I can get 15% by putting it in a money market account. I can go do this over here, right? By diversifying through multiple means and multiple, I call them social security numbers, but they're EIN numbers, right? By diversifying it, I have endless options of returning more than that. It gives me more incentive once you start talking about 1 to 2 to 3% to start using a savings account again.
Mm-hmm. You're right. You're right about that.
Which is why when you start seeing hyperinflation, or we can't call it that, what was close to hyperinflation in England and Japan, they started doing negative interest rates. Now think about that concept, right? Which is one thing I'm so glad the federal government said the U.S. will never do.
Well, they say
we're a capitalist society, true, right? They are Western, but they have socialism in them, so they believe in stuff like that. We will no longer be America if we start doing negative interest rates.
Well, we're well on our way.
It goes against it.
We're well on our way with that. So the whole what actually caused this massive inflation rate and what stemmed this massive or this recession that we're heading into, it's not massive just yet, but it is going to dig a deeper and deeper trench, especially by passing junk like this, is because of the essentially the restriction of the restriction of the energy industry. The energy industry is the driver of everything in our economy. And by closing all of these pipelines, by telling folks that they can't drill for oil there, by telling folks that they cannot have certain cars produced by the end of this decade, you're killing everything in our economy. It's interesting to note that this whole Build Back Better plan, and what this is supposed to be, is Build Back Better light, essentially. What's interesting to note about this is with Build Back Better being a very Green New Deal heavy policy, is that this Inflation Reduction Act actually puts in a new pipeline in West Virginia. Guess who is the senator for West Virginia? Good old Manchin. Manchin was the largest holdout when it came to stopping the Build Back Better and the $3+ trillion spending package they wanted to put together. He was their biggest holdout. He was the most vocal critic. He was the one the media went after the hardest. Well, now he has been the one that's caved. And he's caving because he's getting this pipeline in his state.
Yep.
So where are the convictions? Where are the morals? Where are the
there's none.
Yeah, it's
this yeah. The Childish Bambino song "This Is America" pops into mind every time I think about what the Democratic Party is doing right now. It's literally like business as usual for them. They're like, I will sign if I get $15 million sent to this account. Basically, I need this firm to do this work in my state for this, and then I will sign.
Good old pork barrel spending.
That's it.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting that they would literally be willing to, what they consider, sell their souls for something that they have stood so firmly against. And we're seeing this across the board because, I mean, they're building the wall in Arizona.
They're building the wall. Like I had that, or like I was talking to someone earlier today, and I think I told Justin about this, where like, how are we supposed to take the Democrat Party seriously right now? Like, I mean, like they literally realize that, hey, our ideas and policies are failing so bad that if we want to be considered in this re-election and these midterms for any reason and the re-election in 2024, we're going to actually have to go back to some of the Trump policies. Like they are now putting first American first policies to bring back manufacturing in the U.S., and they're building the wall.
They're being tough on China too.
Yeah. You know what they said? I think this is the greatest thing. They said, well, we're putting the wall up so that they know that this isn't a safe passage. Now, ironically, similar to the pipeline in Virginia and West Virginia. Go back and look at it. They said, we're putting the wall up here so they know that this isn't a safe passage to go. Now,
so they're putting a wall up there to say it's not a safe passage, but they're not doing anything in order to keep the migration down to that unsafe passage. So now when at that point migrants meet this wall, they're going to have to go further around to a safer passage to be able to cross into the country illegally and become illegal aliens.
Yep. That's their look. That was the surface excuse. That was the surface excuse, right? Like, again, hey, You know, you dropped this. The surface excuse. The actual reason is that there is a Democratic senator from
Arizona
Arizona who has been pushing for the
Senator
wall to
Kelly.
be built.
Yep, he's up for re-election this year.
And so they're giving him building the wall in Arizona so that he'll continue to sign on with them.
Oh man,
The pig is big.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
You can't
really
make this
can't.
up.
You can't make this up. This wow, the unsafe passages.
I swear, I died when I read it. I was like, this is, you know,
Oh wow.
There have been some Republicans I'd be like, okay, some consultant fed you a load of bull, but this,
Well, all the consultants feed them loads.
You know what I
All
mean?
the
But
consultants feed them loads of bull.
But here's the thing. Like there's only so much bull that a Republican consultant can feed somebody.
That is true.
You know, like, but this and Democrats are eating it up. Like I don't like. They're like, this is okay. Are you serious? It's okay that everything that you said, it goes back to how Joe Biden, like to me, I got backlash majorly for this. But to me, I don't understand how Joe Biden even became their nominee. They had a black woman, a gay man, and you know everything else that they stand for, and they believe that the country should be going in, and how we need to get away from conservative white men running the country, and they picked Joe Biden,
the old white dude in the room. The old rich white dude.
They didn't pick the woman, the black woman, the gay man, none of it. They picked the old rich white man who used to be very conservative on paper.
Well, not very conservative, but it's very racist on paper.
That is true. What I mean by that is he's from a different era.
I love that saying. Well, so that kind of jumps us in a little bit into the next topic, and so could the NATO treaty actually drive, or could it spark, and what could be considered an unconstitutional war? And what we mean by that is, so the NATO treaty was essentially signed by the countries that surrounded the USSR, or what became the USSR after World War II. When you saw the Soviet Union come in and take half of Germany, take all the land that they came in and conquered during the war as reparations for the loss of life that they had during that war and that engagement. Well, in 1949, per our Constitution, the Senate must ratify any treaty that our federal government, our presidency, engages into. So they ratified the NATO treaty, and the president came in and signed it, and it became official. However, per the Constitution also, well, before we jump into that, part of the NATO treaty, specifically Article 5, says that if Russia comes in and attacks any NATO member or any member of NATO. The NATO, that
anyone attacks any member
exactly,
of NATO,
then it becomes everybody rushes in. All the NATO countries rush in and defend and attack that country that attacked.
Which is how we got everybody. Also, this is how NATO came and dropped troops in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yes,
was because when we declared war on terror and they hit the Twin Towers, NATO then was enacted.
Which I'm still fuzzy on how we declare a war on terror.
I don't even want to get into that because
that's another show in another show. But anyway, but yes, so that did enact Article 5 of the NATO Treaty. However, our own Constitution says before any act or declaration of war can be declared, it must pass through Congress, and that means it must go through both the House and the Senate. But this treaty ratified did not go through the House at all. So if, for instance, Finland and Sweden are getting ready to join NATO, and say, for instance, Russia decides, okay, you want to try and do that, you want to put baby in a corner, we're going to attack Sweden. Well, that automatically draws the U.S. into war per that treaty. But how can we actually go into a war when, per our own Constitution, the House has not actually declared this, or the House has not voted on it? It has not actually been an officially sanctioned issue.
That's an interesting concept that I don't think anybody's ever thought about. Well, a few people have, no one's ever really like dabbled into it, because you're right. Usually the president, in order to declare war, president has to go to both chambers or have both chambers joint and ask Congress as a whole for permission to go to war.
Yes.
And then it's drafted and then signed that we can actually go. But because until then, the president only has a certain number of days that he can deploy troops into a conflict.
90 days.
And
without having to come back and have the funds reallocated.
Yep. And or a bill signing enacting war.
Mm-hmm.
And so that gets really messy because, we keep flirting with World War III. Right?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Like on both ends, because, that's why no one wants to, no one who's in NATO wants to say it, but that's why no one has let Ukraine in, because literally for decades now, Putin has come in and has literally told people Ukraine is ours.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really a country. So you knew at some point before
Taiwan.
Before he died, he was going to invade it. Same thing with Taiwan. Now we start pushing in and we say, okay, well, we'll let everyone around them except for Ukraine join NATO. How long until he cherry picks the next one? Crimea went first,
mm-hmm.
then Ukraine. It's only a matter of time. So we keep flirting with it on one end of the Asian continent. Then we go to the next end and we keep flirting, sending Pelosi over there.
Well, and we didn't send her over there. She decided she was going on her own. Come hell or high water, she was going to Taiwan.
I don't understand.
Well, like, if you look at the investments her husband made, like we were talking about the last time, if you look at the $1 million investment in these conductors that are Nvidia, who is essentially they produce graphic cards for every major computer out there, or your laptop, your iPad, your iPhone. If it's got a graphics card in it, 90% of it is coming from them.
So yeah.
And so she actually met with the head of TMSC, which is the largest or literally the semiconductor company and manufacturer for the world.
TMC has a component inside
TMSC.
Yeah. Has a component inside of every graphic
chip. Yes,
chip.
absolutely.
The way that the market share is kind
of processor.
Yeah. The way the market share is pretty much divvied up is Nvidia. Nvidia really does more graphics when it comes to video games and like Alienware computers, who are the high PC for video games. Xboxes, PlayStations. That's where you find a little bit more of their chips. Well, AMD.
We've got one in ours here.
Yep. AMD does, a lot more of your Dell Enterprises, things of that nature.
Kind of the budget end.
Yes. And so that's kind of the thing when they start talking about video games, Oculus, the graphics chip that produces these 3D realms or these high quality, people who play video games, like there's like a stage, right? Like if you're in it for entertainment, you got an Xbox. If you're in it because you really like you like video games, your downtime, you got a PlayStation, right? If you are like one of those people who isn't seen for weeks at a time,
not according to South Park.
If you're one of those people who's not seen it weeks at a time, it's a computer. You play video games on a computer, and that's where your graphics card is like insane. That's Nvidia.
Yeah, I believe those run upwards of $1,500 a pop if you're getting one of the newer higher end ones.
Well, if you're just getting the base of
just the graphics card, just the graphics card alone is $1,500.
Yeah, just the base. Like, you know what I mean? Like you get the heavy duty one, your card alone will cost you $2,500 to $3,000. And you're talking about, a $10,000 PC that you're building from scrap because they
Mhm.
don't make them like that.
Yeah, a lot of those, when you're talking about components like that, you're either custom ordering that PC or you're building it yourself.
Horcruxes.
Yeah, working on that. But the reason why we bring that one in and bring that one up is simply because, so after Pelosi left Taiwan, after she had been warned and everything about not going there, China started essentially flying military aircraft in Taiwanese airspace.
Plain chicken.
Exactly. Well, and it's not that we should bow down to China and not worry and be scared of what they're doing. And essentially what they're referring to as saber rattling. The thing about it is why are we even considering this? Why are we even going over there when we have our own issues and our own problems here at home that need to be addressed and solved to begin with? So why would she even want to go over there? I mean, nobody's been over there in 25 years. Nothing's changed since then. Why go over there now? Except for the fact that her husband has become so invested in all of this stuff, and that her husband has such high stakes in all of this. And by meeting with these the heads of these corporations in Taiwan, kind of, in all honesty, I'm kind of getting a Biden feel out of this.
Yeah, because you know what, I started to get that feeling too. And we're going, because this kind of leads into Buck Stouts too. We'll get there in a second, because where is Paul? Was Paul there? Is that why like she went? Is because no one's seen Paul? She went to go meet her husband to relay information in between. Whole other ball game, right? But that's kind of the other thing too, is no one breaks rank like that. Okay. Let's just be open and clear. Anyone in our world, you'll get scalded by the principal, but no one really breaks rank. So for the Speaker of the House to publicly defy the President of the United States, who has openly said, I've asked the military and everyone else to tell her not to go.
She got her own battle group to get.
She goes.
She got her own U.S. Navy battle group parked outside of Taiwan while she was flying into there.
That tells me that there was a public display from President Biden that said, don't go, wink, wink. And, here we'll make sure the stage is set. That's the only way that works.
Well, he said, just take a page out of my book. Just make it look like you're going over there for business and international relations. But
really,
yeah,
you're handling your own private affairs.
You're sending a family member over there to pad your pocketbook.
Handle your own affairs.
I mean,
because hey,
Buck's going to get jealous if we don't bring him in here in a minute. If we keep talking about that,
yeah, because he's giving me the look.
About to jump off the wall already. You can tell him he's about to bust out of there. But so let's jump into the next topic that we were talking about, because it's all about DC corruption and the hypocrisy of everything that we see with that, and that's of course just a small drop in the bucket of what we've been seeing crossing over the border and has been shipped to DC, and they're already calling for help and throwing their hands up in the air and saying we can't handle this.
And once again, the hypocrisy.
Yes,
you know what I mean. They flood. They give Texas grief.
Put it up there.
They give Texas grief, but then turn around and do the complete opposite for Arizona and DC. They're saying that DC needs help with their home.
And DC, yeah.
Well, the reason why I say Arizona,
yeah,
was because now in Arizona, like they won't build a wall in Texas, but they'll continue building the wall in Arizona, and then
Arizona's not shipping them to DC; he's shipping them to New York. So,
but then
he hasn't offended the elite in DC yet.
And then they'll say, we just need more spaces for homeless shelters to help house the people, because now we've seen a nuisance of homeless people.
Yeah. So essentially, what he is, or what we're talking about here, and I'm gonna throw some numbers at you. So the Texas governor is sending illegal immigrants over. He's busing them up to D.C. And to the date, since April, roughly less than 3.5 months, he sent 5,100 illegal immigrants who have crossed over, and then Customs and Border Patrol has released back into American society. So Governor Abbott has set up these buses for a 100% voluntary only availability, to where these immigrants will get on these buses and go and have a free ride to DC. When they get off in DC, they are met by now they're going to be met by the DC National Guard, because Mayor Bowser there, old Koopa, has come out and said, we are so overwhelmed. This is a humanitarian crisis in DC. We cannot handle this many people coming into our city state up here and flooding our resources and our social programs. They're eating everything up. They're draining all of our resources here. 5,100, and they're already draining all the resources. Another number that I want to throw out to you is, this was the June report that was released by Customs and Border Patrol, that to date, in June for the year of 2022, there have been 2 million illegal border encounters across the southern border.
That are known.
Yes, that are known. 2 million. Of that 2 million, it is, what is it? It's roughly 150,000 for the month of June alone. They really wanted to emphasize the point that was down 15% for May. However, throw some statistics at you. So that 5,100 that is being sent to DC is less than 0.003% of all of the border encounters that have occurred at our southern border. 0.003%.
And as we shared in a few episodes ago, this is a heavy uptick from what was even done years ago.
Oh, last year.
Yeah. So 2 million now at 6 month mark puts us on pace for 4 million people coming into the country illegally within just this year alone, which is almost 3 times as many as were 2 years ago.
I mean, just for the ratio between what they're sending up to DC and for the encounters that they had on the border just for the month of June, it was 0.03%. So you're not even, it's not even 0.25%. It's not even 0.1%. It is 0.25% of the encounters that they have on the border just for a single month. So imagine how Texas is feeling. Imagine how Arizona is feeling. Goodness sake, imagine how California is feeling. Imagine how Louisiana, Mississippi.
SoCal wouldn't know the difference.
Well, yeah, they're a socialist nation anyway. They just open up and say, "Hey, come on in." Anyway,
it's amnesty.
But even Georgia is feeling the massive impact of this deal. It's crazy to think that they are coming out, and so when she has activated the DC National Guard, this wasn't just for a set time period that they would be helping out with this and helping to get these people into a certain area and helping to find them shelter and then helping them or getting them bussed out of that area. They have been brought in indefinitely. So meaning that this could last 5-6 years, what she's doing with this.
Yep.
The reason why we bring in a lot of the hypocrisy issue on this is, frankly, Koopa up there has been one of the nation's leading advocates of open border policies. She's really been a big friend of illegal immigrants and illegal immigration. But yet now that they're actually coming to her city, she's crying, we can't have this. We can't handle this. We need federal intervention.
It's just like everything else that fits Democrats. While it doesn't affect them, they're all for it. But the moment that their policies are shown to be a burden on them, they want to change, because it has never affected, everything that they say has never affected them before.
Yeah, and it's not like we were saying earlier. It's not just DC. It's New York City as well. Mayor Eric Adams up there he's done the same thing. I'm thinking that a lot of these folks from DC are traveling up to New York City and have been hitting their socialist programs up there and draining their resources. So he's really been a big vocal person on this, saying, "Hey, we got to do something about this. This has got to change. We need federal intervention on this." They're not talking about reforming the border policy. They're saying we need more government aid in order to help these illegal immigrants in our cities.
Yep. Which goes back to what their whole big thing is to begin with. More big government, big spending, influx of money, because all they care about is what their continual increase of federal funds is. That's it.
Yeah. It's a shame to see that we have become so reliant on Big Brother rather than our neighbor
And learning
or
to
ourselves.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, here's the other thing too, that a lot of people don't think about. People aren't leaving. Mexico, the country of Mexico is okay with people doing this because a good portion of their revenue that comes in is people sending money back in USD.
Yeah.
So it's not like this isn't orchestrated.
They're getting rid of their lower socialist tier folks that they're having to pay all this extra money for, sending them to America to
make
have
money.
Our quote unquote socialist program paid for while making money, sending it back to Mexico, opening up the availability and the space for Americans to come into Mexico and Mexico City,
and
purchase purchase land there and become corporate taxpayers in that sense.
Correct. And then those who are there stay. And then they repeat the cycle. You know, it's almost like, God, I can't believe I'm saying this. You know, in the olden days when you had,
the good old days.
I said the olden days. In the olden days when you had that one sibling who, you know, bless their heart, mom and dad didn't know what to do with, so they sent them somewhere to you know, just go make a little something for the family or keep their name together, keep the family name in. That's kind of it. You know, while all the ones who are becoming doctors, politicians, attorneys, and everything else, those are the ones who are staying in Mexico. All those who either want to come over and get another education or are doing another task, they're the ones sending them to bring it back. It's not the high-end individuals in any portion of Mexico that are staying.
It's not the folks that are contributing to their
federal
society. Income
Yeah.
base. It's the people who would be benefiting from their federal income or their socialist programs down there.
Yeah.
So it's a shame to see that that these policies are creating these issues in these cities. But quite frankly, I mean, they asked for it.
They did, because they wanted to say this was a red state problem and that we were being racist. Well, okay.
Yeah. So we'll give you a 0.003% taste of what we're experiencing down here, and yet you can't even handle that much in 3.5 months.
Which is like, here's my thing. I know it's higher than that, right? So let's just take this as an example. So what we're saying is that let's say there are 10,000 people who are homeless inside of DC, and they only increase that by 5,000, 50%, right? There should be enough aid all the way around to where they already were planning for an increase anyway. You know what I mean? Like that should already be built into their system.
Well, I mean,
like when you look at United Way or any other program, the community kitchen, anything else that's built in, like there's a certain level of increase or donations that they're looking for every year to plan for the following year.
Well, we're seeing that United Way, these community kitchens and everything are seeing a windfall and a drastic reduction in the windfall of these donations and these people who are charitably giving to these organizations simply because they can't afford it now.
Yeah.
Because of these open border policies, these these Green New Deal initiatives that they're trying to enact and push out there, these anti-industry policies. And we're seeing this to where that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And now they're starting to say, hey, or they're crying about saying, hey, we can't handle this because we can't get these community donations. But the reason why we can't get these community donations is because nobody can afford it because of the policies that we advocated for.
Yeah. I'm laughing because this also reminded me of something that I heard. And
I'm glad somebody laughed.
well, it was an analyst who was on Bloomberg who said, I don't believe that we're in a recession because people are still spending a lot. And it always hits me because there's a certain class and a certain type of person who has never had to go without or never had to scrape it together. Also reminds me of a certain doctor who ran for Congress one time, who
shall remain nameless,
who don't understand,
mm-hmm.
What the average person has to go through. And that disconnect is the same disconnect that we continue to see from the left, from places like DC and New York. They are so far out of touch with the average American person that you literally have to leave it on their doorstep in order for them to even get a glimpse of what people have to go through every single day.
You're right. And you just hit the word of the day, and which leads us into our topic, what Buck was asking about, and that's glimpse. The glimpse, speaking of, Buck keeps asking us, where in the world is Paul Pelosi?
I think I got a glimpse of it.
So the reason why we bring this up, and keep in mind, the fact, one of the facts that we'll bring up with this is 100% normal. This happens in just about every single case. However, it's interesting to note there are some
nuances.
Yes, great word. Nuances that are involved with this that kind of throws a little, that'll raise an eyebrow from here to there. So, if you're not aware, Paul Pelosi ghosted his arraignment hearing today, where he was being arraigned on 2 counts of felony DUI, which was the result of him having an accident in Napa Valley where he had injured another driver. Now, at the time, the driver said, I'm not injured. I'm okay. I don't need an ambulance. Well, I can tell you from firsthand experience in dealing with this sort of scenario, because your heightened levels of adrenaline, you don't actually feel a lot of the things that you should be treated for during that time. So a lot of people often don't take emergency medical response. For all we know, the guy may not even had health insurance, so he may not even been able to afford an ambulance.
It's always a second call when you get in an accident.
Exactly.
Never believe what they say there. Wait for them to call you.
Exactly. So what we're talking about here is he got into this accident. He injured another person. The person at the time said they were not feeling like they needed medical attention, but come the next day, they began to actually seek serious medical condition or medical treatment for essentially neurological injuries. You had some you had some soreness in their arms, which is to be expected with whiplash, and it's consistent with everything with a minor injury, except for the fact that he was experiencing neurological symptoms, which could be a result of a major injury, which would have advanced it from a misdemeanor to a felony in the state of California. So he would have had 2 felony counts applied against him had they actually applied the standard of law to him in that regard. And again, we are not attorneys, but we did stay at Holiday Inn Express last night, so we're qualified to comment on this.
Yeah.
And we are giving our opinions with this, but one of the things that's really interesting, and the reason why we bring up where in the world is Paul Pelosi, not only did he ghost it, nobody's really seen much of where he's gone, but to get out of that issue or to get out of that wreck, when the responding officer came up to him and asked him for his ID, after he had, well, before they administered the sobriety test, which he failed multiple sobriety tests. When they asked him for his ID, he did not hand them his ID. He fumbled through his wallet and pulled out the California Highway Patrol Benevolence Fund lifetime donor card and handed it to the officer. Now, we all know what that is, and if you've seen if you've seen any of the contemporary movies where, for one instance,
contemporary movie, that's a level of privilege. It's a level of privilege.
What is it?
Point of privilege.
That's what is that movie? Chips.
Yeah,
where a guy in the fancy red Ferrari gets pulled over in California for going 120 miles down the highway. As he's trying to be pulled over, he hands the patrol officer his lifetime donor card and basically says, "All right, I'm good. I've donated to your funding, so I'm just going to keep driving and not worry about the law or anything along that nature." It really emphasizes the elitism that we see with a lot of these leading Democrat families.
Point of privilege. I use that a lot because it's funny, right? Because sidebar, those of you who don't know, a point of privilege inside of Robert's Rules of Order is that if you're a part of an organization that is organized and you feel that you are being disrespected or degraded at any point because you're a part of that organization, you use a point of privilege. And that's where your clarification is. Some people think that just by association, donation, or anything of that gives them the right to invoke their point of privilege into any form of justification as associated with that organization. You'll see people do it on all different levels of law enforcement or political arenas or really anything that philanthropy, anything that you can, give large sums of money to. And they think that just because they did that gives them a right to do whatever they want. And no.
Well, again, going a little bit further down the rabbit hole on that one, so by ghosting the arraignment, that at that point in time, his wife scheduled a trip out of the country to a dangerous area where there could have been any sort of mishaps or anything that could have happened, to the country where her husband has just recently invested a large and very significant amount of money, which, if I'm not mistaken, as of just the other day, has already seen a 25% return on that investment so far.
Yeah, if he put $1 million of Nvidia into Nvidia 3 to 4 years ago, he's probably sitting close to double.
Well, he put it in a month and a half ago, and he's already seen a 25% return. So he's already gotten $250,000
so Nvidia,
off of it.
Yeah, because Nvidia was less than $100 a share 2019.
So by him doing that, and so again, purely speculative on this, was he on that plane? Was he on that plane?
That's what I'm saying. Like that goes back to my whole point from the other part, right? Like, it's unless President Biden is lying to us, unless Joe is lying,
which is not that far out of the mindset.
It's not that far out of the mindset, right? She went because he went, and
she went because he went to China, because he's never been to Taiwan. Not officially.
That we know of.
Yes, not officially.
Because here's the thing, right? Like, you can say whatever you want. So you fly private, you fly. There are multiple ways where you can fly and your name's not on the log. You just need. I'm not going there, but there. It's not. There's a way to where that he could have been on that plane, as long as Nancy's name is the one that's on that log to go to Taiwan.
I'm not sure 100% about this, but whether or not the actual the passenger manifest was ever made publicly available. Just because we didn't see him walking off that plane when we saw Nancy and greeting, all the dignitaries and things on that nature, does not say that he wasn't already on that plane, knowing that he wasn't going to be attending his arraignment. And again, That is 100%
speculative. We're making this.
It's not just that, but that is 100% normal. I mean, that happens every single day. Your attorney goes before the judge
before you, yeah,
makes a plea. You don't have to be there for that process.
The only time you really have to be there is if you do plead guilty, you sign, or if you have to go to court. Like whatever you.
Well, even if you're in court, you sometimes you don't.
You don't have to actually be there in court
outside of sentencing.
Yep, that's it. Like most of the time, like that's just normal for your attorney to handle all your affairs, and unless you are asked by the judge, or you are there to enter a guilty plea or be there for sentencing after you have been convicted, pretty much, then that's the only time you really have to be there.
Yeah. So
or testifying.
Yes. So was he on the plane or not? That's something we'll have to see if we can file a FOIA request and see if that's something.
Here's my next question, right? So if it did go up to a felony, would finding out if he was on that plane make him? I mean, that's a problem.
No. Well, if it did go up to a felony,
because then
it still would have been the same. It still would have been the same issue.
Leaving the country?
Mm-hmm. Because at that point in time, he was not.
Well, he didn't kill anybody.
He was not on trial. It was an arraignment.
It was an arraignment, and he didn't kill anybody.
Mm-hmm.
It was just for injury. So really, it's more of just civil. Like it's not really. He would have been charged criminally.
It would not have been a dangerous or a violent felony.
Felony, yeah.
It would have
still frowned upon to have a felony and then leave the country while you're supposed to be at your arraignment, but that's a whole other ballgame.
Well, if had it been a felony, I'm not 100% sure about this. It's something I'd have to look up in California, the penal code, or at least the annotated code for California is he may have been required to appear. But since it was just kept at the level of a misdemeanor, he may not have to.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that they're going to come up with some sort of a plea deal, just simply because of all the actors that are involved with this, to where he'll donate a couple $100,000 to a charitable organization, and then this will die and go away.
House arrest for a couple months.
I wouldn't even say that. He's just going to donate the money. The judge will slap him with a fine and say you have community service, and he'll donate the money. He won't do any community service.
I think because of the attention that everything's getting right now,
well, it's being buried.
It might be a little bit more than that. Well, TMZ is kind of on top of this.
Well, TMZ is TMZ.
I know, but when you really don't see people follow situations like this with politicians. But the more and more politicians who are getting into situations like this, especially those who are supposed to be, I guess you could say, acting like they're holier than thou across the country, and then their spouse,
or that believe that they are.
Yeah, and then their spouse comes out and is doing, same thing. It wasn't criminal, but I mean, think about the fact that she went to the hairstylist during COVID.
Yeah,
that blew up like that.
Well, I mean, think
about how many politicians
been criminal.
I know, but think about how many politicians get a DUI or people who get a DUI and it's never heard of, and the fact that it's even got a little bit of traction is only because it's Paul Pelosi. So now you throw in the fact that Nancy disobeys everyone in the United States and goes to where he has a large stake in a business that is in, controversial territory. If it's found out that for any reason she met with someone that has to do with any of those firms.
Well, she did meet some.
Well, what I'm saying is to a non-political measure.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, I see what you're saying with that.
You see what I'm saying? If she met with any of them that is, it has nothing to do with politics or, talking about China and Taiwan being its own independent country.
Well, she wouldn't have had if Paul was on that plane and took those meetings while she was in front of the cameras.
Correct. Which is a whole nother aspect to it.
Again, that's invoking the Bidens.
Who walked on the plane while she was down on the carpet talking to everyone?
That's a Clinton move there. Well, as always, we have reached that inevitable point in every episode where we circle back to the beginning, essentially,
And we have to say goodbye.
exactly. But before we do that, we always like to close out each show by saying, anytime you see any of our productions on any of our platforms, any of the platforms, make sure that you hit the like and the share button on there, or the like and the share button. That really helps us to get higher in the news feed and be able to reach a broader audience and get our content in front of more people, particularly your friends and your connections. Make sure you leave us a comment. Let us know what you want to talk about, what you want to hear from us on this. We're starting to get a couple of comments floating in, and those are some of the things that we can address in the upcoming shows. But some of the things that some of the things that have been coming in, quite frankly, are haters. We always like to say thank you to those because they're just helping us out even more.
Makes it fun.
Even the little mad face on there gets us higher in the news feed. So thank you.
All reactions are good reactions.
Exactly. It's like there is no bad press.
There is no bad press.
But when you find our productions on these platforms, make sure you hit the subscribe button on there as well. That way you can stay up to date with everything that we produce, that we put out there, and you can stay current on all of our content. Go to our website if you're able to. It's on the screen there, conservativestalk.org, and make sure you hit the sponsor tab in the upper right-hand corner and the lower right-hand corner and help us out with anything you're able to do with that. Everything that comes through that goes an incredibly long way in helping us to be able to advance our production and really upscale everything that we're doing, and really help to be able for us to be getting a lot of these larger initiatives that we want to pursue and that we want to push out there accomplished, and move further ahead on what we're wanting to do with this. While you're there at our website, make sure you also sign up for our bi-weekly newsletter that we're getting ready to roll out. And well, I know we keep saying that, but it is coming. It will be rolling out here in the near future. And by doing that, we keep talking and touting this big, huge project that we're working on. If you sign up for our newsletter, the first newsletter that we send out, we'll go ahead and make this commitment now. The first newsletter we send out, we'll give a little teaser of what it is that we're working on, hoping to accomplish there with that, and kind of lay out some of the things that we're wanting to do with it. I think that's a fair compromise. Jamie's biting his lip so he doesn't tell you what it is.
Yeah. I was going to give you a number, but that's a giveaway too.
Yeah. Nothing, Jamie. So let's roll into your favorite part on this.
95 days until we beat Stacey Abrams.
Love it.
Can't wait.
Yeah,
chop on, go Brian Kemp.
It's exciting. You're doing it again, man. You're just wanting to get out of here, aren't you? Well, okay. Jamie's pulled the hook, so this has been Jamie's and I's conservative talk and an insight in our mindset.
See you next time.